Awesome, great. So before I pass off to our speakers, there's a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. So first off, this discussion is being recorded. The session recording will be sent out via email within 48 hours. There is also a Q&A at the end of this discussion. So please use the Q&A module to write in any questions you have. If we don't have a chance to get to your question, somebody from our team will follow up. As well as please provide feedback. There will be a little survey that will pop up at the end of the discussion. This just helps make sure that we can provide you with really valuable content. And then finally, Aduro is recognized by SHRM to offer professional development credits, PDCs. This program is valid for one PDC. You will receive your activity ID at the end of this presentation. It'll show up in a slide. And now let me turn it over to Aduro's Chief Human Performance Officer, Tony Best, our host for today.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you to everyone who is joining us today. So grateful to have you here to talk about this very important topic of mastering your mindset in these uncertain times. I am Tony Best, a founder and Chief Human Performance Officer at Aduro. Aduro is an organization that exists at the intersection of well-being and performance, and we unlock human potential in the workplace by providing expert coaching, interactive content, meaningful incentives, and personalized insights in a fun and inspiring way. And this ignites cultures and creates inclusivity and builds social connections that promote growth and flourishing for all people. I have with me our very own Aduro Human Performance Coach, Jyotika Barrio. And Jyotika has a background in psychology, peer counseling, case management, and of course, lifestyle, health, and human performance coaching. She also offers her passion up at Aduro and her experience in leading the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coalition, which is a program that she started and now offers guidance to the organization around ensuring a sense of belonging and equity for all of our employees. So happy to have you with us this morning, Jyoti. And we welcome our renowned expert, Dr. Shauna Shapiro. Shauna Shapiro, PhD, is a best-selling author, clinical psychologist, and internationally recognized expert in mindfulness and self-compassion. She is a professor at Santa Clara University and has published over 150 papers and 3 critically acclaimed books, translated into 16 languages. Shauna has presented her research to the King of Thailand, the Danish government, Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Summit, and the World Council for Psychotherapy, as well as to Fortune 100 companies, including Google, Cisco Systems, and LinkedIn. Her work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Mashable, Wired, USA Today, Dr. Oz, the Huffington Post, and the American Psychologist. Shauna is a summa cum laude graduate of Duke University and a fellow of the Mind and Life Institute, co-founded by the Dalai Lama. Her TEDx talk, The Power of Mindfulness, has been viewed over 1.5 million times, and I can attest that it is worth every minute. So welcome, Shauna. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you both here, and I find it both interesting and a little bit ironic, the place that we are currently in right now in the world. In the leadership and executive coaching world, we've actually been talking about living and leading in a VUCA world for the better part of a decade. So VUCA meaning, it's an acronym meaning volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so, that has described our world for a while. And when you come up against issues in leadership, it usually lands in one or two of these categories, but you place a global pandemic in front of us and it kind of hits all 4. And there is no playbook for this. There's only a couple of people alive now, I think, that have ever lived through a global pandemic. And so we're being asked to make these abrupt changes with no time to ease into it. We're being asked to be quick, adaptable, and resilient in the moment. Not everyone has those skills or has really developed them in a way that feel like they're part of our everyday normal. And so we're seeing a rise in anxiety, and we know that organizations cannot be resilient without resilient leaders. So we've got what seems to be a new normal, but it is not normal. And for most people, this is going to continue to unfold and change, whether we're being asked to work from home when we never have before, or working home with kids at home, losing jobs, spouses being laid off, fear of those things, or maybe still being on the front lines, out there talking to people, out there connecting with people, and what that entails and what kind of resilience we need to have. So, we have also people that are supporting all of those on the front lines. We have leaders that are dealing with elevated emotions, their own and the people that they're leading. So everyone's going through something. And now we're just adding this on top. And I think that our mindset can be the make it or break it thing that helps us get through this, both on our own and together. So, Shauna, talk to us about mindset. How can mastering our mindset be helpful during this time?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And it was such a beautiful introduction, because I think what you're saying is that all of us are impacted, and we're really being asked to kind of, without any training, without any preparation, jump into this new world. And one of, I think, the best ways to build our resilience and to support our mindset is through mindfulness. And the word mindfulness means to see clearly. So all we're trying to do is see clearly what's happening in this moment as it's rapidly changing, so that we can respond effectively. And the way we see clearly first is by paying attention. People often say that time is our most valuable resource. They're wrong. It's our attention. Where our attention goes is the most precious resource we have. And yet most of us haven't trained in it, right? Even as I'm speaking right now, people might notice their mind has already wandered off. And so part of what mindfulness does is train us in how to be present, so we can meet whatever is happening and respond. The second part of mindfulness that I also think is crucial is our attitude, which is how we're paying attention. So all of a sudden we're training our attention, we're paying attention, and all of a sudden we're meeting a lot of stress. And if we get judgmental, if we start shaming ourselves, feeling like we're not doing things well enough, anyone feeling that way right now? It can actually shut down our brain's capacity to learn and think clearly. So the other part of mindfulness is learning to bring kindness and curiosity to whatever is happening. So I'm fully present, but I'm kind and open and curious, and I'm meeting this moment.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for starting us off so powerfully. I think, one of the things that we are noticing is that in these times where we are faced with new challenges, it really seems like those things that you're talking about are actually a lot harder to come by than they are during normal everyday experiences and activity. And so, what are your thoughts just around how this new normal, so to speak, how can we capitalize on the change that is happening right now in order to be able to establish these new ways of thinking and being into our life, so that we can manage through all of this newness and this change?
Absolutely. Well, I think the good news is that these skills, these practices are available to all of us, and all of us have the capacity to learn them, to learn these practices that really grow our resources and grow our resilience. And so what I'm hoping we do together in this time we have is really offer some of the practices. And one of the first things I would say is the first step is simply just to name what you're feeling. All of us are experiencing stress, uncertainty, overwhelm. The first step is just to say, I'm scared right now, or I'm stressed right now. They've done research, actually, one of the studies at UCLA showed that when you name your emotion, it actually down-regulates the nervous system, down-regulates your physiology, and helps you cope with it better. So the first step of mindfulness is simply naming what's happening. And it sounds a little strange just to say it, but it actually helps to calm our nervous system down. The second step is to bring compassion to ourselves. So we name, I'm afraid, And then there's this sense of like, sweetheart, you're afraid. And it's like you're comforting a young child or your dear friend. Instead of pushing it away or distracting, we actually bring compassion. And then the third step, which I find incredibly helpful right now, is to reflect on the fact that you're not the only one who's afraid right now, that all of us are experiencing fear. And so there's not this sense of isolation in my fear. There's a recognition we're all in this together, and to begin sending compassion out to everyone, you know, to send that same care and that same kindness out into the world. And that helps us feel that we belong, that we're part of this, and that we're in this together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that makes me think of our coaching team at Aduro. We have a team full of coaches that are talking to people every day. And we have some software that analyzes our calls. And we're certainly seeing a shift in how people are showing up, the things that they are dealing with, the things that they're talking about. And we're certainly noticing that they are naming some pretty heavy emotions. Jyoti, talk to us about what you all are hearing on the phone with your coaching clients.
Yeah, absolutely. There has been a really big shift in the amount of calls that we're having where we're seeing high amounts of stress. So in that software that Tony, you mentioned, we've seen things like, or words rather, like overwhelm or anxiety taking up about 22 to 24% of our calls. Other major words that have been pulled out and like themes that we're seeing in our calls are like hopelessness, being stuck, feeling grief-like emotions, even negative sentiments. We're seeing that around the 10 to 17% range, grief actually hitting about 28% of our calls. So a lot of high stress right now, which is a pretty big shift from what we were seeing before. All of that being said, it's really common, especially right now, to hear words like social distancing, isolation, even just the epidemic, pandemic types of things that are being thrown around. And what we're really doing as coaches is helping our members in taking a look at really just accepting that right now is not a normal time and allowing it to be okay to feel all these feelings that are coming up. And then also kind of redirecting and shifting to what we actually do have some control over, because that's where a lot of these emotions come from, is just feeling uncertain and feeling that fear. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm curious. Shauna just talked a lot about mindfulness, which we know that she is an expert in and a researcher in that field. And this is a focus for our coaching team. And as you said, helping people reframe their thinking and focusing on being mindful. Have you had some experiences recently with any of your coaching clients that have really used these techniques successfully in order to help them manage through this time?
Yeah, definitely. One person in particular comes to mind where they've taken it upon themselves to start their day off with mindfulness. And so when they wake up, before they check their email or look at their phone, before they wake up a little early, so before other people in their household wake up as well, they spend about 15 minutes just in silence, enjoying their breakfast, enjoying their coffee, and really just being present in that moment before the distractions of the day kind of take their attention elsewhere.
Very good. I think that is a really good segue into hearing a little more, Shauna, about mindfulness and just our nervous systems. You talk about neuroplasticity a lot, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And I know we form these behaviors and patterns in order to create energy efficiency, right? And some of those patterns and behaviors are additive to our lives, and some of them are those things that we would call negative behaviors, the things we're always trying to break. So talk to us about neuroplasticity, the way that the nervous system works, and why does that matter right now?
Absolutely. Well, neuroplasticity, I believe, is one of the most important discoveries we've had in the last 400 years of brain science, in part because it's such a hopeful message. And what it teaches us is that it's never too late to change. That no matter what habits you've created, no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter what your past, it's never too late to rewire your brain for greater happiness, greater health, greater resilience. And what we're finding is there's different practices that you can do that can actually grow resources, that can actually create what's called cortical thickening in certain areas of the brain that are related to happiness and resilience and emotional intelligence. And I think, the key is really to give people hope and to say that there's these simple practices. They're not complex. They don't take a lot of time, that actually can make huge shifts in the brain. What we found, one of the studies from Sarah Lazar at Harvard found that people who meditate have larger areas of the brain that are related to compassion, that are related to memory, attention, all these resources that we need right now. And I think what you all were talking about, this sense of there's so much out of our control right now. And that is true. There's so much, but there are certain things that are in our control. And what mindfulness helps us do is see clearly, where should I direct my attention? Where can I actually grow resources? And where am I just spinning my wheels in anxiety and in helplessness? And so what we're trying to do is discern, to see clearly, what's the best use of my time and attention. And I loved hearing that one of your clients is starting their day with mindfulness. And I do find that we can kind of impact the whole trajectory of our day when we begin in stillness, and we begin by setting our intention. What is most important? Really reminding ourselves of what we care most about, so that we can act in accordance with our values.
I think that is really powerful. And I think it would be super powerful if we could all experience some of that together. And so, Sean, I'm wondering if you can take us through a 3 to 4 minute mindfulness exercise. And for all of those who are on right now, we have 245 of you currently on live, which I think is super powerful. And if you came on to learn a little something and take on to other people, I believe that one of the most powerful things that you can do is to experience it yourself. And so whether you have practiced any form of mindfulness or not, I encourage you to really join in and practice this mindfulness exercise with us.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And one of the hallmarks of neuroplasticity that you'll hear me say again and again is what you practice grows stronger. That we actually don't learn through just having an insight, right? You hear something, you're like, oh, that sounds great. We learn through repeated experience. So I really encourage you to practice with us. And if you'd like, you can let your eyes close. And if not, you can just look down at a single spot. It's just easier to focus inward with your eyes closed. And then just take a moment to move your body in any way that feels comfortable, to get into a comfortable position. And we're going to begin by focusing our attention. Remember, we're training our attention so that we can see clearly, just in the body. It's one of the easiest places to start. So feel your feet and just wiggle your toes. And then feel your ankles and your calves and your shins and knees. And notice how the mind already wants to wander off, and simply bring it back. It's like a little puppy dog. It wanders off and you're like, stay, stay, and wanders again. You say, come back. So coming back to the thighs and the hips and the buttocks. And then draw your awareness all the way up your spine. Let it spread out over your shoulder blades and shoulders. Maybe just softening your shoulders, and let your awareness pour down both arms into the palms of the hands. And again, all we're doing is training our attention, carving out these neural pathways. Bring your awareness into your belly and soften your belly. And then just notice that you're breathing. You might notice the movement of the inhale. Your belly kind of rises and fills with air. And the exhale, releasing and letting go. Oxygenating the body with each in-breath. Releasing any stress with each out-breath. And then just continuing up into your throat and face. Soften your jaw. We hold a lot of stress there. Soften the eyes, the forehead, the temples. And just let your whole body rest. And see if you can infuse your attention with 5% more kindness, 5% more curiosity. So we're paying attention in this open, kind, curious way, letting the nervous system settle. The mind will wander off. You'll just simply bring it back. And again, this is just practice. It's not about being perfect. It's not about doing it right. We're just building these pathways of resilience, moment by moment. And so as you're ready, taking a deeper breath in and out, and just taking a moment to reflect on one thing you noticed during this brief practice, one thing you want to take with you. And then as you're ready, take another breath in and out, and you can let some light come back in through your eyes. And I like to just go ahead and stretch my arms above my head. Any movement feels good. Okay, good.
Thank you, Shauna. That was really lovely. And I'm wondering, I've been practicing mindfulness and starting my day with mindfulness for many, many years, and my mind still wanders off frequently. So does it ever stop wandering off?
That's a great question. To make everyone feel better, it's natural for the mind to wander. A research from Harvard, a research study showed it wanders on average 47% of the time. So that's about half of your waking life that you're missing, you're spaced out. And what mindfulness does is it starts to train and stabilize the mind in the present moment so we can see clearly. Now, is it going to continue to wander? Of course. And the real key to mindfulness is, how do you bring it back? Do you bring it back with frustration and judgment and anger? No, because then you're just going to be growing those pathways. So you bring it back with kindness, with compassion, with curiosity. You know, where did it go? And one of the best teachings I ever heard was, notice the tone of your voice when you bring your mind back. Can you say, oh, sweetheart, come back, where there's this kindness? And then you're cultivating kindness. Yeah, great question.
I love it. And one more for you before we move into a little bit of a different topic. But, you know, I think for me too, it's really easy for me to continue doing the practice when I have somebody guiding me. So I have some different things, you know, at my fingertips, that some apps that I'll pull up, some videos from our own coaches walking us through mindfulness exercises. But that's not always really convenient, you know, and sometimes I'm in a moment and I need a moment. How do you recognize those moments and pause and do it on your own when you're not really practiced in this exercise and in this practice?
It's a great question. So the most important thing is just that first step of awareness of, I need some support right now, or I'm stressed right now. And so that awareness is what cues you into pause, take a deep breath, right? Our breath is an incredibly valuable resource. And then what I tend to do in those moments, just to let my eyes close, and I'll just let there be a gentle smile on my mouth. And the smile sends this biochemical message to our nervous system that says, you're safe, you can relax. And it's this way that I can actually shift my physiology relatively quickly. And the smile isn't papering over how we feel. It's not saying, oh, don't be stressed, be happy. That's not what mindfulness is about. Again, mindfulness is about seeing things clearly. What the smile says is, you're okay, there's support, there's resource here. And then you can start to see clearly because you've calmed yourself down.
Excellent. I love that. And I love just taking the cues from ourselves. And I think the more that you become aware of those, the normal reactions that we all have our reactions to things, the more we can use those as the cues in order to take a pause. I know I'm finding some different things that are really bringing me into this place where I need more pauses right now. And Jyoti, I know just from what you just said and because of our conversations earlier that there are some very key things that people are dealing with right now that maybe aren't their previous normal. What's one of the biggest topics that you've had conversations about with your coaching clients that you've helped them to create some new practice around?
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. I think one of the biggest pieces that we're hearing about is really creating those healthy boundaries and routines while working from home, especially when you have more than just yourself at home. Maybe you have kids or parents or spouses or significant others or whoever that might be. And it's just this weird noon time where the routine is completely gone and the boundaries are gone. And so there's a few key things that you can do if you're finding that coming up for you. Really just setting your intention at the beginning of the day, kind of like the example I mentioned earlier with one of my coaching members. Just setting your intention for the day and making sure to carry that forward. Also defining your priorities. I think it's easy to expect a lot from yourself, especially being at home and having a lot going on, but also a lot of time back in your day. Still understanding that it's okay to have those priorities and some of it might not get done today. The other is scheduling your time, and that can look different for different people. Maybe it's parceling out time to do certain things. Maybe it's setting up block schedules or setting up time even where you allow yourself to have a break and help your kids with their homework or whatever it might be. Another important one is to set up some expectations with both your work and your family so that everyone's on the same page. Again, it might not be perfect right away, but really just focusing on those small steps, even if it's one small thing that was able to go well that day. And then it's also helpful to remember that these are all things that help when you're still going to a workplace as well. So even those of you who are still going to work in an office setting or warehouse setting or wherever it might be, clinic or hospital setting, these still carry over and they still apply. You can still set your intentions, define your priorities, and set up those expectations with everyone.
Thank you. I think those are really practical and simple steps that we can take even when there's a lot going on around us. And this makes me think of some of the other things that I've heard from friends, coworkers, our coaching clients as well. Just the feelings that are arising, being a working parent that has kids at home, not being able to do it all, feeling less productive and like we're not meeting all of our obligations the way we need to. Thinking that working from home was going to be great and realizing this is just not a thing for me, or, the impact of losing work or a spouse or a family member losing work or getting sick and just feeling like we can't get it all under control. Shauna, what comes up for you as a way that we can approach those feelings, those extra added feelings that are coming on top of everything else? And you're muted.
I'm good. Here we go. So one, we just experienced it in myself, is to have compassion for yourself, that we make mistakes, we don't do everything perfectly, and that's normal. That's okay. I love this idea of setting an intention, and I think we need to clarify what that means. So your intention really, it sets the compass, right? It says, this is the direction I want to head. I want to get this done, or I want to be sure to spend time with the kids, or I want to exercise. But it's not a destination. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's really setting the course. And so when I work with people, we set our intention, but it's not as a way to beat ourselves up. And I think that's what's key. All of us have the capacity to change. This is what neuroplasticity shows us. The reason people don't change is because they're missing this key ingredient, self-compassion. And so I think the key to all of this, and especially all of these challenges and changes, is that we cultivate compassion for ourselves, that it's okay to not do it perfectly. And what I want to make really clear, and I love Kristen Neff's research in self-compassion, is because what she has shown over a decade of research is that people who are more compassionate with themselves, they don't become self-indulgent. They're not selfish. They don't just kind of become a couch potato. They actually are more effective leaders. They take better care of themselves in terms of healthcare practices. They are they're better in relationships. They're better able to get things done. So what I want to share with people is that being kind to yourself, being compassionate with yourself, it doesn't let you off the hook. It actually enables you to be more productive and more effective.
I love that. I love that. And it occurs to me something that you and I have talked about before is a lot of these emotions that we're feeling are rooted in this underlying sense of shame that we can't really do it all. And how does this idea of self-compassion help us with that sense of shame? And you know, I think there's a lot of us that go into these feelings of shame and guilt, and those are those underlying pieces. Can self-compassion help us with that?
Absolutely. It's really an antidote to shame, that we kind of all have this mistaken belief that if we judge ourselves, if we beat ourselves up, that we'll improve or we'll get better or we'll get more done. It doesn't work that way. When we feel judgment or shame, the areas of the brain that have to do with learning and growth shut down. So we actually inhibit our very capacity to learn. We go into kind of a fight or flight response, and our resources are shuttled to survival pathways instead of learning centers. And so what self-compassion does is it actually creates a learning environment that is optimal. It bathes our system in dopamine. It turns on the learning centers of the brain. It turns on the motivation centers of the brain. And it really gives us the resources to change. And so what I tell people is, you know, if beating yourself up worked, I would say go ahead and do it. But it doesn't work. Self-compassion is actually incredibly effective.
Excellent. Well, is there an exercise that you can take us through? Maybe let's say a 2-minute exercise in self-compassion so that we can experience this. And then next time this comes up, because we know that the feelings will return, next time this comes up, we'll know what to do in order to you know, get right to that.
Absolutely. So the key for self-compassion is to imagine a dear friend coming to you with the exact same situation you're in. So if you've made a mistake or you've messed up, let's say you've yelled at a child who's making noise while you're trying to work, okay? So what you would do is imagine a dear friend came to you and said they had just done that. How would you respond to them? What would you say? So I'm going to invite everyone to think of something, a mistake you've made or something you feel kind of bad about. Doesn't feel great to do it, but go ahead. You can do this. I'm going to walk you through. So let your eyes close and just think about one thing that you're feeling kind of remorse about. And then feel the remorse of it. We're not pretending it didn't happen, but then try putting your hand on your heart. Just as you would with a dear friend, just saying, oh, sweetheart, this is painful. Bringing your own care and kindness to the situation and offering yourself the support and the kindness that you would a dear friend. That instead of judging or beating ourselves up, we actually become our own inner ally instead of our inner enemy. Recognizing that judgment and shame just shut us down. They don't help us learn. And then it's through offering ourselves this kindness that we can see clearly and repair and hopefully act differently in the future. So the key right now is just offering yourself this kindness, even if it's just 5%, right? It might feel a little strange at first. And then when you're ready, you can just put your hand back in your lap and let your eyes open. Good. So the real ingredient of self-compassion is to imagine what you would say to a young child or a dear friend. How would you support and counsel them? And that's really the wise voice that you want to bring to yourself. anytime that you're trying to make a change or you've done something that you feel badly about?
Thank you. I realize just doing that exercise and hearing you talk through it, I am a master at beating myself up and having unrealistic expectations of 100% of the time, always being kind, always being compassionate to myself and those around me. And if I can't do it for myself, it's also harder to do it for others. And I saw a comment from Carolyn in the chat that, what examples, I think this example that you just gave is a great one that we can take to people as leaders. But she asks, what can I do to show my team members compassion during this time while still building accountability and promoting productivity? And I think that is so important, because as leaders, whether it's leaders as a coach, as a healthcare worker, someone who's supporting others, but I feel this very strongly as a leader, that I'm taking on a lot of the stress of others. And I'm watching leaders go one of two directions, and it's pretty clear. They're either going into a place of kind of locking down and wanting to focus in more on tools to help them measure productivity. And then I see others just going into being exceedingly human and really connecting with people at a deeper level, and having getting in it with people, and having tons of empathy. And so, how do you think of taking this idea of self-compassion, bringing that to others, and still, not just letting go of all of the expectations that people have to meet? What are your thoughts there?
Well, this is where mindfulness and self-compassion are just such beautiful allies. Mindfulness lets us see clearly. It's really, you have this laser-like attention where you're seeing everything clearly with an open mind. And self-compassion, it brings in, and really compassion in general, brings in that human side. And so I really like to kind of blend them together, where I'm seeing things clearly with this open heart. And one of the things you said, which I think is really important, is, some of the leaders are kind of shutting down and just focusing on the data and productivity. And some maybe are swinging too far to the other side and getting, completely involved and maybe overwhelmed and by all the suffering that they're encountering. And so one of the things that I think is so important is recognizing the difference between empathy and compassion. So this is some relatively new research out of Europe showed that when we feel empathic for someone, so let's say we see someone stub their toe and we're like, ooh, ow, right? Our mirror neurons are what allow us to feel what someone else feels. And what happens when we see someone suffering is the pain centers of the brain light up. So when we are experiencing as leaders all these people coming to us in tremendous suffering, and we're empathizing with them, our pain centers are continually being activated. The key is not to shut down and not to numb out. The key is to feel it and then transmute it into compassion, which is caring for someone, which is wanting the best for them. And what they found out of this research is that when we feel compassion, our pleasure and reward centers light up, because we're focusing on the care and the kindness instead of on the pain. And so empathy is really a gateway to compassion. And I think leaders need to learn how to practice feeling the pain, not closing down to it, but not getting lost and overwhelmed by it, and really directing their attention to, how can I best support this person? What is needed here? And that's where mindfulness comes in. It lets us see things clearly so we can respond with wisdom and compassion.
That's very powerful. And that is new research to me. That's since you first told me about this, I've really been practicing that, because I've recognized that I'm one that goes into it with people. I sit in the muck with them and I feel it. And at the end of the day, that can feel just so heavy, and it can feel really draining. And like, I don't know if I have more to give to people tomorrow. And I've been practicing this, and it really is, what's powerful about it is that, sitting in those feelings is one thing, and then having the thoughtful conversation with yourself about what I'm feeling and why am I feeling that way. Oh, it's because I really feel love and care for this person, and having that shift and being able to to really bring back the energy through that. Like, I now do have more to give to people.
Absolutely. I mean, when I'm working with my students who are all training to be therapists, I tell them, this is like your protective suit. It's compassion. It's not, a lot of healthcare professionals kind of swung to the other side and said, well, I just need to numb out and, otherwise I'm going to burn out. But actually it's your care. It's your good heart. It's the reason you were drawn to this profession that is going to protect you.
Yes, and Jyoti, I know you have some experience with this as well. How are you managing yourself and your own mindset through all of this? Because you're holding a lot of heavy stuff right now.
Absolutely. It's such a great question. And I've seen a couple people in the chat bring that question forward as well, because it absolutely is exhausting. I think one of the biggest things I have had to do is recognize when I am caring too much. Being a coach, and I'm sure for anyone who's like in healthcare or whatever you do on the line, you care about people and you want to be there for people and you want to fix leadership, whatever it might be. But for me, taking a step back, leaning on my supports when I need that help to like talk through what I'm feeling, and giving myself permission to not be overconnected. I found myself not only carrying my coaching clients and what they were feeling, but also my family and my friends. And I wasn't giving myself that break from connecting with people. I have a lot of introverted energy and do need that break sometimes. So not only was my emotions getting overloaded, but my just connection energy was getting overloaded as well. So yeah, it just goes back to giving myself that permission to take that step back when I need it, to ask for help when I need it, to even just take one day where I set my phone aside and say, no, I can't connect today, or even just like 5 minutes to unplug. It doesn't, there's no one right way for it to look. But to Shauna's point, it's shining that compassion on myself as much as I would for the people around me.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. Shauna, go ahead.
Yeah. No, and I was going to say that it's so important. I love what you're saying about really taking that space to care for yourself. It's interesting. If you look to the heart pumps blood to itself first and then out to the rest of the body. And if it didn't, the heart would die and the rest of the body would die. And so I think really for anyone who is in a caregiving leadership, healthcare professional role is to make sure to find that time. And I think the one nuance that I really want to bring up is it doesn't mean that you have to shut down your caring, that you can continue to care and feel this love and support and kindness for all these people you're working with. So, because it actually takes energy to block our caring. So we're not blocking our care. We're not disconnecting in that way. What we're doing is just shifting our focus toward ourselves. And again, that's really our resource, is where do I want to put my attention? And a lot of people carry the suffering and the trauma from people they're working with into the next moment. But if you think about it, the next moment, you have a choice. And so again, it's not shutting down your care, it's just being very careful with your attention.
Thank you, Shauna. I really appreciate that. And all of this, I'm seeing some of the questions in the chat, and just thinking back to that question about, how do we both, whether it's in leadership and coaching and caregiving in any way, being super empathetic, we can make this shift into compassion. And then we also know stuff still has to get done in the world, right? So I take myself back into this role as a leader and think about, the key things that I can do to really make sure that I am supporting my people the best way are, first, to take care of myself and make sure I am giving myself that time, to recognize when unexpected behaviors show up from people, because they will. And Shauna, like you said, this is throwing a lot of us into fight or flight. So unexpected behaviors might show up in ourselves and our teammates and in our teams in general. Reactivity, negativity, those decreases in productivity. The best ways to approach that from a leadership perspective are from a place of curiosity and compassion, to even just asking people, how are you? Helping them to think through what are the things that they can control, the things in front of them that they can control, and try to focus on those things. And then also really being realistic with expectations. And maybe if you are a parent who has your kids at home and you're now homeschooling and you're working full time, be a curious and compassionate leader and ask them, okay, I recognize you have a whole lot going on right now. How can I best support you? Let's prioritize the things that are on your plate. And let's look at if there is anything that has been on that list that maybe can wait. And if it can't, how can I support in helping to get that done so that you don't burn out through this experience? And I think that those are just some really simple and human ways to both have compassion for people and to still get the work done and make sure that we have productivity happening. This makes me think of just creative ways that we can stay connected and fend off loneliness and isolation. This came up for me on 3 different calls yesterday with people that I work with that live alone, and that's never been a problem for them. To live alone, they actually quite like it. But now that they are not going into work all day, they're really craving this sense of human connection. And so we've done a few things at Aduro. We actually have opportunities to connect live for mindful moments, for intention setting, to get together and do 20 push-ups, to take a walk together and just talk to people, and connections that don't have anything to do with their work, to give people a little bit of that outlet. I think, there's another piece of that's just about shining the light on the humanness of leaders. We have one leader that's running a bingo game in his team, and not just any old bingo game that you can pull off the internet, but like Scott wore the blue jacket during our meeting today. Pebbles made an appearance on the webcam, which is one of the dogs in the team, and those kinds of things. So those are some from a leadership perspective, how we have tried to bring people together, virtual happy hours, virtual coffee dates, and those sorts of things. But Jyoti, you kind of commented on, sometimes having fatigue from being overtly connected. What are your thoughts in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to also quickly add, I've also seen people do virtual game nights. There are games and apps and things that you can play together from a distance and cooking together virtually. But yeah, the overconnected piece is definitely real. And that's where, from my own personal experience over the last few weeks, I've had to kind of mitigate that a little bit. It comes back to, I think, the mindfulness of just checking in with yourself as you go about your day to day and really figuring out, how am I feeling? Is what I'm feeling that loneliness? Do I need to reach out to someone and schedule some time? Is what I'm feeling over connection? And do I need to take a break? And knowing that it's okay to not be perfect. Like, there's going to be some of those days where you don't check in with yourself and you end the day feeling kind of meh and you're not really sure why. But to Shauna's point from earlier, making sure that whatever your next step is, you're bringing some attention and awareness to how you're feeling and choosing how you're wanting to move forward from there.
Yes. I think, this reminds me of one of the questions that people sent in advance, which is, you see all over social media right now, oh, well, now that you're isolated in your home, here's all of the things you can do. You can clean out that closet you haven't cleaned out. You can learn a new language. There's all these things you can spend this time doing. How do you combat the feeling that you should always be doing something and taking complete advantage of this time?
Absolutely. And I will be the first to say, I'm not doing any of that stuff. Like completely like real and honest. The compassion fatigue I have, the overconnection fatigue I have, there's a lot that I could or should be doing outside of work or even inside of work. And it's okay for me to give myself that space of like, this isn't a normal time. Yes, I have more time in my day, but the amount of emotional energy that I have is still finite. And so just being kind to myself and knowing it's not like it's never going to get done. It will get done, but I don't have to be productive every single moment of every single day while I'm working from home and we're in this space. I think looking at productivity from the standpoint of how much gets done and what that outcome is can be it can be draining and exhausting. And the way that I really look at productivity is how much am I giving to myself in that day? Like, what is it that I'm needing to do or accomplish? And even if that thing is sitting in some silence or taking a break to do 15 minutes of my puzzle, that's okay. And it's still productive. It's still giving value for me and what I'm needing in that moment.
Mm-hmm. There's a question that's come up in the chat, and that makes me think of a couple of things both of you have said, which is, you know, in this time where people need connection, there are certain people that kind of think they deserve your attention all the time and aren't necessarily putting what you need out there. So how do you decide who you connect with? And set, and this is for either one of you, how do you decide who you connect with, and how do you set boundaries around you know, people that are asking more of you than what you have to give?
Jyoti, I'll let you start.
Yeah. And that's a really great question. I feel like taking, again, a look at giving to yourself first and giving yourself permission to make that decision based off of what are your needs. I mean, I can say from both in my calls with coaching members and my own experience myself, when I don't set up those boundaries and I'm just giving, even if it's those situations where there isn't that reciprocal nature. I mean, I don't show up as my best self. I get irritated, I get irritable. I snap at my family members. Like, there's a lot of things that don't go well when I'm always giving in those situations. So the way that I've been trying to look at it, and the way that I've been kind of bringing this forward as a perspective when I'm coaching as well, is how much of service are you actually being to that person if you're not taking a moment to assess if this is something that you are actually able to do in this moment. How well are you actually going to do on that project if, you know, your reserves are at like -10?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree with that. And I think really the resources that we're teaching here with mindfulness and compassion are about learning how to make wise choices, you know, and to really listening deeply, what is the best choice in this moment? And the way that we build that skill is through practice, that we need to practice moment by moment, really learning how to attend to our body, to the sensations of the body, because that's where our emotions reside. And it can help cue us on really what are the wisest choices in this moment.
Absolutely. There is a really great question that just came through. And it is, what are some tactics for lowering the barrier to entry for skeptical people to try mindfulness? And I think that there's going to be some good stuff in this answer from Shauna that's also going to answer a little bit another question that I saw around the general concern of an increase of substance abuse during this time. So while those seem like different conversations, they actually have some roots into like how can we get people into this idea of mindfulness instead of other self-coping mechanisms.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I always lead with science. For me, that's why when I came back from Thailand and Nepal, when I was about 20 years old, I decided to get a PhD program to really study the science of mindfulness, because I recognized, first, I didn't totally understand it, but second, that really helps people trust you, that it's not just like, oh, this is some spiritual thing that I want to teach you, but this has decades of research showing the benefits. So I always lead with science. To respond to the second part, all of us are concerned about substance abuse right now. There's people are under a lot of stress, and it's an unusual time. It's tricky. I don't believe that you can force anyone to change. I think it has to be a choice. And so I'm very cautious to kind of overly push mindfulness on people. People have to choose, and they have to know why they're choosing it, that it's because I actually want to take care of myself. And so I think it's wonderful to present the science and to present the options, but the best way we impact people is through our own behavior and through regulating our own emotions. And as we are more calm and more clear seeing, it will help others do the same.
I love that. And I think that that is a perfect place for us to wrap up. I think if we don't wrap up with at least a short exercise, a 1-minute exercise in just loving kindness or gratitude, we would not be wrapping up the right way. So Shauna, can you take us through one more exercise? This will give us 3 already for people to take away with them, and then we'll point you all to some more resources as we wrap up.
Absolutely. So you can feel, as we're speaking about these things, there are stressors that we're talking about. There are things that are uncomfortable. And what I want people to understand is it is so important to spend some time each day not worrying about it. Some time each day, I call it pendulation, where you pendulate from the negative into the positive. And one of the simplest and fastest ways to do this is through gratitude. So I'm going to invite everyone to take a moment and, again, let your eyes close or just look down at a spot. And first, just take a moment to feel grateful for yourself for taking this time to learn these resources. And just feel the purity of your intention. Feel your own good heart, right? You're here because you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to help. So feeling gratitude that we're all here together. And then thinking of one person in your life who has done something kind for you, has supported you, and they don't have to have been perfect, just one moment of kindness, calling that to mind. Noticing how that feels in your body. Maybe letting there be a gentle smile on your mouth, and even letting that smile crinkle up into the eyes. Feeling your breath and just wishing this person well, just sending them your kindness, your good wishes, your gratitude. And then just thinking about each person here. We have over 250 people all together on this conversation, and think of how all these people just like you are afraid and also wanting happiness and wanting this sense of peace. And so maybe just wishing that for each person, just sending out your good wishes, wishing them well. And also knowing that right now they're wishing you well. So maybe as you exhale, just sending out these good wishes. And as you inhale, just breathing that in, receiving it. Knowing that we're all in this together. And maybe just offering that this time, this conversation, these practices, that they be of benefit in this world for everyone. Feeling the wholesomeness of spending our time in this way. And as you're ready, you can take another breath in and out, and you can just let some light back in through your eyes. Again, you can stretch your arms. Good, thank you.
Thank you. And we have used up 100% of our time. So thank you to both of you, Shauna and Jyoti, for being with us today. And we're going to send you to some resources. If you are already a client, we have past practices and a lot of bite-sized content that is currently coming out. A lot of this is on our website. So for those of you who aren't clients of ours, you can find that as well. And we have some live casts, both I will be leading one 9 a.m. on Tuesday mornings for leaders, and we will have one with our coaches on Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock. And Olivia, I will turn it back over to you.
All right. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Tony and Shauna. And this is just incredible. For those of you who are looking for the SHRM activity code, you can see it on the slide right here on the screen. So make sure to take that down if you need it. And then, as well as Tony said, we have our complimentary twice weekly live cast starting on April 14th. That'll be happening. And for more information about Aduro and for access to the resources that she mentioned, please visit the URL on the screen and in the chat.
And I forgot to mention, actually, Shauna's book. You can find a link to her beautiful book, Good Morning, I Love You, which I just recently finished. Tons of bite-sized practices and exercises that you can do anywhere, that anyone can do. And all the science is wrapped up in there as well. And so follow Shauna. She has so much more to offer than we were allowed to give her time to offer today. And we thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Tony. And just for those that want to reach me, you can reach me at drshaunashapiro.com, and there's free meditations and resources there. And I just hope this was of benefit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.